Thank you, Daniel. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. It's a beautiful day out, so we hope, I hope I won't keep you very long. I think we're scheduled for about an hour. I'll just start by saying, just to reiterate what Daniel mentioned. So we are going to talk about the various socioeconomic categories today. I'm going to just give you a brief overview of each of those, or the ones that are recognized at the federal level. And we're really going to put it more in the context of how contracting agencies put out set-asides in those categories. But as Daniel mentioned, we are doing courses or webinars throughout the next couple of months or the next few months on each of these programs. So if you think you may be eligible and you're interested in more information, we're going to devote an entire 1 hour on just each of those classes, or excuse me, each of those categories. So as he mentioned, we're going to do the 8A program in March. We'll cover the Hub Zone program in April, and then we'll cover the Woman-Owned program in May. So again, as he mentioned, check out the events page so you can see the dates and times for those. So without further ado, see if I can get my mouse working. Okay, so again, we're going to do an overview of the socioeconomic categories that are recognized at the federal level. And I'm going to, again, try to put it in some context for you in terms of how we look at the agencies putting out set-asides and how you can take advantage of those if you qualify for some of these categories. So I think it's just important to know, and I should preface by saying, normally when we used to do these in person, which feels like forever ago, we would kind of go around the room, particularly if it was a small room, and we kind of introduce you and your company, and if you have any past experience in government contracting. I'm making these webinars these days with the assumption that a lot of people are either somewhat new or new at contracting. So we're going to kind of set some of this up and put it in a little bit of context for you. But it is important to know that in terms of what SBA does and what our mission is to work with small businesses and help you grow in various capacities, one of which is looking at the federal government as a market for your business. Small businesses, as you may have heard, create over 95% of all the new jobs in the US. And when you look at federal contracting, particularly, our size standards for small businesses are actually, the thresholds are actually quite substantial. You can stay a small business in this market for quite some time. And because of those size standards, most businesses are really considered small. It does, of course, vary by industry, but our size standards, again, are very generous, and you can be a small business for quite some time. And then the sort of portion of what SBA does in the federal contracting space is to help small businesses get access to those contracts, help you understand the process and find your way to building a strategy around locating and bidding and winning contracts. A lot of very small businesses will, find open bidding opportunities, and as you find those come open, you bid, and that's certainly something that you can do. But I think it's really important to create a strategy around the federal market, just like you would really any other market for your business. And we, of course, are going to do lots of presentations and webinars throughout the whole year on various aspects of that, building a market research strategy, and other types of programs within the federal space that you can take advantage of, again, to help your win rate, your bid rate, and your win rate go up, so to speak. SBA works closely with the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, which Daniel is a member of. If you are not already a PTAC client, you should be. My role at the federal agency level is to talk about policy, regulation, general outreach and guidance, but certainly the boots on the ground, helping you as a business individually build your strategy again for this market. You really should be working with the PTAC. They also assist you with the local government sector as well. So anything going on, with the state of Nebraska or the city of Omaha, for example, city of Lincoln, they can assist you with as well, because we work together to, again, make sure that small business are getting access to these contracting opportunities. So to put it in a little context, and I have a few slides here that I want to set this up a little, again, for those of you who are new. Some of you who maybe have participated in our webinars will see some of this information or have seen it before. But I like to let people know that you really need to, again, when you're building your strategy, you need to think about the agencies that are out there that buy what you sell. So that's really your first step, if you will. Prior to thinking about what socioeconomic categories that you fit, you need to start looking at agencies and are they even buying in your industry? So there's a whole sort of, set of procedures or process around that. This slide here is just to kind of give you a snapshot of, this sort of $400+ billion federal market. The Department of Defense, and I just ran it for maybe these are like the top 10 agencies that we tend to see over and over. Of course, Department of Defense is the largest federal purchaser of goods and services, with almost half of the dollars going out. And within Department of Defense, there are obviously sub-agencies, Army, Navy, and so on, that you really need to sort of hone in on what are their missions, what are they purchasing, what are they buying from small businesses, and so on. Some of the things that they purchase are reoccurring contracts. Anything from, garbage collection to, the large one-offs of building a new building or renovating a building, or, even as large as building airplanes, quite frankly. So you really need to do your research again to see what agencies, buy in your industry. The rest of this just gives you an idea of sort of what the larger agencies are with contracting budgets. I think it's also important to point out in the right column of those contracting budgets, these agencies are really working with small businesses. So of those dollars, quite a bit of that goes to small businesses. So this is just, again, to set the context that agencies do have goals, which we'll talk a little bit about. But they really are utilizing small businesses to, to help meet those goals. So that's what this slide tells you. So we have federal-wide or government-wide every year. SBA works with Congress to monitor whether or not agencies are actually meeting the contracting goals that Congress has set each year. And these are sort of the minimums of what those goals are. And these are the 5 socioeconomic categories that are recognized by the federal government. And again, we're going to touch on each of those, again, just to give you a general overview of each of them. But I do want to use this as a moment to, again, if you're sort of new at government contracting, these are the 5 categories which have their own eligibility criteria and benefit only at the federal level. Now, you will see some states and cities that have sort of their own types of socioeconomic categories, probably very similar, but yet differences as well. So, if you hear about the woman-owned small business program, that might not or is not the same as, sort of the WBE or Woman Business Enterprise program you may hear about, from some local governments. There may be, again, some similarities, but these are different. So these are the ones that we cover government-wide at the federal level with all agencies. And these are the goals that, again, Congress has set. So at least 23% of all contracting dollars are to go to small businesses, 5% to small disadvantaged businesses, which is really the 8A program that Daniel mentioned, and we'll talk about what that is. 5% to the woman-owned small business contracting program, 3% to the HUD Zone program, and 3% to the service disabled veteran program. So again, we monitor this not only government-wide, but by agency to make sure that they're meeting these goals. And these are just minimums that SBA has worked with Congress to set. If you, do your research into some of the agencies that you possibly want to work with, you'll see that some of them have set these goals higher. So it's important to know where their goals are and if they're meeting their goals. I will tell you, government-wide, we do a pretty good job of meeting our goals. And it's continually increased over the years. There's conversation that maybe we need to increase the goals at some point in the future. But you can see here sort of that middle graph, or excuse me, the middle column. It was the goal for 2019. By the way, this was the same goal for 2020. We just don't have official numbers reported for 2020 yet. But we did quite well in 2019 in exceeding those goals. Except for the hub zone goal. If you've been following us or following government contracting for a long time, the hub zone goal is a goal that we continually as a government or as a whole do not generally meet. We are increasing it year by year. It is getting better. And actually there have been a lot of regulatory changes to the hub zone program in the last year. So we hope we will see that percentage go up because of some of the changes that have been made. And we will, I will cover what all of those changes are more thoroughly in our hub zone course that we're going to do in April. But anyway, if you do qualify for the hub zone program, it may be something you want to consider. Again, because agencies are always looking for good hub zone certified firms, to help meet their goals. And this is just a graph to kind of compare to the national achievement. This is what we did in Nebraska in 2019. I like to show this because I'm pretty proud of the businesses in Nebraska and what we've managed to accomplish. And so when you think about the national goal there on the left, how we did in the state, well over half of the contracts that went to Nebraska-based businesses went to small businesses. So, and the other programs, we far exceeded those goals as well. So I attribute that to really well-run businesses, but I also attribute that to our partners like the PTAC. The PTAC does cover the entire state. Our counselors are very good at what they do. So again, I encourage you to work with them so we continue to increase these numbers. And I really, as I said, attribute to a lot of the work that the counselors have done in the PTAC across the state to help businesses not only bid properly, but obviously get awarded, get paid, get those contracts executed, and importantly get paid. So we are doing very well in the state of Nebraska. I'm not going to cover these steps, but I just wanted to throw these out here that as you're thinking about, if again, for those of you that are new in contracting, as I said already, it really is a strategy that you need to set. If you don't, you really can spin your wheels in government contracting. The good news is sort of the same as the bad news. The good news is there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot, the money to be followed, if you will, is vast, but that also can be overwhelming also for a small business. So, but keep in mind, it is, as we know, taxpayer dollars. Every dollar that's spent on a government contract is taxpayer dollars. So the information is out there. It's just finding it. Again, there's lots of agencies, so it's understanding what their buying missions are, what they hope to be, purchasing in the future. So it really does take a strategy of working it, understanding everything from the nomenclature to the acronyms, and how agencies purchase from you as small businesses. It is highly regulatory, as you can imagine. So there is a prescribed process to contracting that must be followed. So, you really do, again, want to work at really trying to create a good strategy on entering this market. Otherwise, it could get frustrating. We are going to talk a little bit about NAICS codes. I just want to set that up so that you understand how the government views industries. And the reason that's important for this particular presentation or webinar is because you need to understand whether you're a small business or not based on your industry codes. Because again, small business is one of the categories that we measure agencies awarding contracts. I'm not going to talk about SAM and DSBS, but You will want to work again with PTAC, or certainly you can try it on your own. But to do business with the government, just to be a vendor to the government, you do have to be registered in the SAM system. And it's also important, not required, but important that you're registered in the Dynamic Small Business Search Profile, or DSBS. That's really how you market yourself as a small business to the government. And the registration for that is sort of a subset to SAM. So you want to be registered in those two systems. And again, developing a marketing strategy and doing some good thorough market research. Number 6, what we're going to really talk about today is an overview of the certifications and eligibility. Again, I already mentioned this, really doing your homework and finding out what are the trends in spending, what are the buying strategies of the different agencies, and then of course bidding. That's a whole nother class, as well as, reviewing proposals, understanding what you need to submit, and then of course executing on the contract. So just real quick, NAICS codes are, that's an acronym for North American Industry Classification System Code. You can view NAICS codes. You can do your research on your industry. It's managed by the Census Department. So the US Census manages these industry codes, actually for lots of different reasons for the government. We sort of we kind of segment, if you will, industries by these 6-digit codes, so that government can do, research and data analytics for lots of different things. But we use it at the SBA to be able to classify you as a business being small or large. A couple of sites you can go to. The census.gov site is the main site. Sometimes, depending on what's going on in government, the site, it hasn't been down for a while. It's a good site. And actually, they just revamped it. But in case it's not working for some reason, you could always go to NAICS.com as well. But you can search by your industry. You can search by keywords, and then you can start to review these codes. And once you get to a code, you can get the detailed information about what does that code represent as an industry. And you'll find that you may have more than one code that represents what you do. You generally have a primary code, and then you may have some secondary codes that you use to, market other segments of your business to the government. But really, that's the one, the first step really is going out and researching the agencies and what are they buying, what do they hope to be buying in the future, but then also understanding how that applies to what codes apply to your industry. Every contract opportunity that's put out for bid has a classification of a NAICS code. So that way you know whether you're a small business or a large business based on that NAICS code. Once you know your NAICS codes, as a small business, again, this is something that you really would want to work with a PTAC counselor on, but as a small business, you may, again, only have one specific thing you do, and that's okay. You may only have one code. But if you're in fields like construction or IT, there's lots of codes. So you may have more than one. Therefore, they have different size standards. So you may be small in some of those codes, you may be large in others. Likely, you're probably small in most codes. Again, we have very generous size standards. But this link takes you to the size standard table. I recommend periodically checking that to make sure that the size standards haven't fluctuated or changed. We do that sometimes, based on inflation, based on some of the studies that are done. Some of the NAICS codes will increase in size standards. We did just have an increase last year. It had a kind of an across the board inflationary increase to the size standard. So I suggest you download that and look at that once you know what your NAICS codes are. And again, you'll know whether you're a small business or not. And as I mentioned, contracting agencies use these NAICS codes to classify their requirements. So when they put something out for bid, they're going to have that corresponding NAICS code associated to that requirement. Okay, so that's just kind of setting this up to looking at you as a small business. So again, we're going to briefly touch on the different socioeconomic categories. kind of what I've talked about to this point, which is, again, understanding what your NAICS codes are, whether now you'll know whether you're small or large. You need to get yourself registered in the SAM system. When you register yourself in SAM, you'll load your NAICS codes. You'll load some profile information about you in there. And there's sort of an algorithm behind the scenes that will then put into your profile whether or not you're small or not for those NAICS codes. What you've done by doing that is you've now self-certified yourself to be a small business in your relevant industry codes. And I make that point. So again, for those of you that might be new, SBA does not certify small businesses. I still lingering get calls from people who, particularly small businesses that are going to subcontract to larger businesses. Sometimes those larger businesses will come to you and say, well, we need to know your certification from SBA as a small business before you can work with us. There is no such thing. So we're slowly trying to teach the large businesses this, and I think they're all finally catching on. But if you get that question, what you need to do is revert them back to your SAM registration. So your SAM registration is, again, the profile about your business. There's a public side, and then there's the proprietary side. So you're only going to see the proprietary side, but there is the public view, which, by the way, you can also go search SAM and look for other businesses in your industry and so on that are registered. That's what you would want to do. And by having an active record in SAM, you're stating that you are self-certifying yourself as a small business. And really that's whether or not it's a large business that you want to subcontract to, or it is directly to an agency. Prior to award, the agency has to look up your record in SAM to make sure that you have verified that you're in there, number one, and really it's to get paid, but also they need to verify your small business status. So, but that's what you're doing to self-certify yourself as a small business. The other programs, and excuse me, I needed to update that little blue bullet. I just realized I haven't. We just changed over to a certification for the woman-owned program. So the green and sort of red dot, the Hub Zone program, the 8A program, and now the woman-owned program are certifications by SBA. So those are the three programs that you could get certified in to be eligible for contracts or set-asides in those categories. The Service Disabled Veteran Program is still a self-certification for all agencies except the VA, which we'll talk about. Okay, so I'm going to cover a quick overview on each one of those. Excuse me. So the 8A Business Development Program, again, this is the certification side of the SDB, or Small Disadvantaged Business goal that I talked about earlier. And really what this program is for businesses who are owned and controlled by both socially and economically disadvantaged persons. So you need to be socially disadvantaged or considered socially disadvantaged and economically disadvantaged. And if you meet those criteria, then this program might be right for you. Now, again, when we do this class for the whole hour just on the 8A program, we'll talk more about what does it mean to be socially economically disadvantaged. I have a couple of bullets there. And ownership and control is also very important to not only this program, but all of our certifications. So we would get more heavily into that. But if you are a member of one of those categories, you would be socially disadvantaged, and then your economic disadvantage is based on your net worth, your personal income, and your total assets. And we get a little bit more into what that means as well in the program. You must be, this is the only program where you do have a length of time you must be in business. So you do need to be in business at least 2 years prior to applying to the 8A program. The only caveat to that is you can apply for a waiver if you have not been in business for 2 years. I will say that it is tough to get into the program under a waiver. You really have to demonstrate that you have been working in this field or this industry for a long period of time, and you have some successes, maybe working as a, let's say a project manager for another construction firm. If you did that for, 10 or 20 years, and you can show that you have the relevant experience, but yet your own business has been in business less than 2 years, you could potentially apply under the waiver. But generally speaking, you do need to be in business at least 2 years. The program is a 9-year program, so you're in it for a long time. And it's really a program to help you grow over those 9 years, so that by the time you graduate, you really can, you've gotten some contracts, some past performance under your belt, and now you can graduate and go on and successfully compete on your own in the contracting space. Those 9 years are sort of broken into two types of stages. The development stage, which is the first 4.5 years, where we're really trying to grow your business rapidly in the 8A program. And then the last half is the transitional stage, where we're kind of trying to help you get closer to graduation. You work heavily with this district office if you're in Nebraska, or if you are in another state, you'll work with the local SBA district office in that state. And again, it's really, it's not only 8A contracts, which of course is what, most people come into the program for, is access to the 8A contracts, but it's also really a business development program. We're looking at lots of different ways to provide you with business development assistance for your business. As I mentioned, it is a certification from SBA, so your application, excuse me, which is fully online now, goes to an office in San Francisco, California. Does not come to this local district office, but your application goes there. And then once you're certified, then you are turned over to our district office. The PTAC program also, particularly the director, Veronica, can help you. She's done a lot of these applications at this point, and can really help you sort of outline what you need to do for the certification. And again, we'll talk more about what those certification pieces are more in depth in the class that we do on the 8A program. The last piece is probably the most important one to most small businesses, quite frankly, that hear about the 8A program, is you do have access to sole source contracts. No other program provides direct sole source contracts without being bid. The whole government contracting program premise is based around competition. Although something may be set aside for a small business category, it still really is about competing that work amongst those small businesses. But the 8A program is the exception. Meeting certain dollar thresholds and dollar limits, you can get direct sole source awards without competition. So, and again, we'll cover more of that in depth when we do the class on the 8A program.
Hey, Lisa,
the Hub Zone, yeah.
can I ask a question that I got here really quick?
You sure may.
So, it's asking, in SAM, does the self-certification button for small disadvantaged business mean that you have to meet all requirements for the 8A program?
Actually, that's a great question, and I do cover that in my class. So this SDB program is a little bit nuanced. So there was a time in the past, whether you were 8A or if you weren't 8A, you were just SDB, you did have to get SDB certified. That's not been the case now for quite a few years. So the 8A program is the SDB certification. Just the SDB side is a self-certification. So to your question, yes, SDB is a self-certification. However, correct, it does still follow the criteria of the 8A program. It's just not the certification. So yes, it's a self-certification, but yes, it does still follow the parameters or requirements of the 8A program. And the important difference from a contracting perspective is if you're 8A certified, you get access to prime contracts that are sole sourced through the 8A program. If you don't go the 8A route in your SDB, again, remember there is an SDB goal. That goal applies as a subcontractor to a large prime contractor who can take credit for awarding dollars to you as just an SDB. So I hope that makes sense. I kind of added to your question there because I wanted to put it in context of where the benefit is. But yes, to the question, it is a self-certification. You would check the box if you know you meet the the 8A criteria. You would check the box to self-certify yourself as an SDB. And then again, that the leverage you have there is mostly on the subcontracting side. The government doesn't award contracts directly based on SDB. They only award it under the 8A certification. So hopefully that answers the question. If that doesn't fully answer it, or maybe it created more questions, certainly type into the chat and we can continue on that if anybody has any more questions about that. Okay, so the HubZone program, that's again, a certification as well. So 8A was based on you as an individual being socially and economically disadvantaged. So this program is really a location-based program. It's where is your business located? And primarily the HubZone program has to be, your principal office has to be located in an area that is considered low income and high unemployment. And the HubZone, we actually have a HubZone map. And just in the last few years, you've now been able to actually go into the map and you can put an actual address in and you can see if it's in a HubZone qualified area. But again, generally speaking, HubZone areas are areas of the country that are above the average on unemployment and below the average on income. But if you're a numbers junkie, the analytics behind how that's done is actually on our website, so you could certainly review how it's done and the data that it's based on. But that generally gives you an idea of where these disadvantaged areas are. So if your business is located in a HubZone, so your principal office, and there is a definition for principal office, but also 35% of your employees reside in a HubZone, then you could qualify for this program. So again, something that you may want to consider. It's again, remember this is the program where we continually do not meet our HubZone goal. So if you already know you're in one of those areas, and especially if you have fewer employees, sometimes when you start to get a lot of employees spread across the country, certainly it can get complicated. But it's a relatively easy program to apply to. And like I said, we have had a lot of changes that have actually benefited the program and will benefit you as a small business. Just in the essence of time, we aren't going to cover those here, but certainly if you think that this program applies, come to our class in April and we'll talk a little bit about more about this. From a contracting perspective, the HubZone program is the only one that gets the 10% price preference. I'll cover that a little bit more in that class as well. But the 10% price preference only applies to anything you bid on that's unrestricted. So what we call full and open competition. So if you're a HubZone firm who bids on a contracting opportunity that's full and open, so meaning anyone can bid, you as the HubZone firm could potentially get the 10% price preference on that type of contract. So it's not used where price is the only selection factor, and there's other things involved in that. But all other things being said in the review process, if you get that 10% price preference, you may actually technically come in under the bid of the large business that you're bidding against, and therefore it may be that one additional factor that helps you win the contract. So that's the 10% price preference. And again, we'll talk about that in more detail in the class, but just that's the contracting benefit to this particular program. And that's really about it. In the yellow box, there is the HubZone program has really revamped itself in the last couple of years. They're really trying to do more interface from Washington with the public. They still do these classes a couple of times a week. I shouldn't say classes, they're just open forums. You call in with any question or topic that you have, and so HubZone experts are on those calls to help answer those questions. So it's, again, it's just an open forum for an hour to ask questions of, if you've got something specific or detailed that you want to know about, you can get on those calls and ask those questions as well. Or certainly you can come to me. The Woman-Owned program. So again, I mentioned this program is now, again, goes back to like 8A. It's based on you as an individual, which is, that part of it is pretty self-explanatory. This program, in order to be a woman-owned small business, you must be at least 51% owned and controlled by a woman. If you apply to the economically disadvantaged woman-owned program, you do have to meet economic disadvantage criteria, similar to 8A. And again, we'll cover what those economic disadvantaged thresholds are in that class. But there is lots of information on our newly revamped website at sba.gov under WSB Ready. They've really been marketing this program heavily, and have really done a good job actually of getting information out because of the change with the certification, which started back in October. The certification is done at the Beta Certify site. And excuse me, I should have had some information. I do this in the other classes, but the 8A program is at certify.sba.gov. And really, if you go just to certify.sba.gov, there's actually a link in there that will take you to the beta site, which is where the Woman-Owned program currently resides. But you can really access everything from the Certify site for the certifications. The only nuances, excuse me, the only nuances about this program is it does not apply to every industry right now. We hope it will in the future, and that is a discussion going on in Congress. But right now, this particular program, in terms of the contracting opportunities, only applies to certain industries. And it's industries where women and economically disadvantaged women are underrepresented. So the idea was to provide more opportunity for women to compete in industries where women don't generally compete. So one of the first things you would really want to do is go to the WSB Ready site and download the listing of NAICS codes or the industry codes that apply to this program, and make sure your NAICS codes are part of this program. If you do not see your NAICS code, that means you will not see any set-asides available to you as a woman-owned small business. However, if you do compete on a small business set-aside and you win it, the agency can take credit for awarding that small business set-aside to a woman. So there still are definitely some advantages to being woman-owned outside of those categories in government contracting. But specifically for the woman-owned small business contracting program, you do have to find the applicable NAICS code. But again, we'll get more heavily into that when we do that class as well. The service-disabled veteran program is very similar. Again, it's based on you as an individual. You have to be 51% owned and controlled by a veteran. I mentioned this earlier. For any agency outside of the Veterans Administration, it is a self-certification. So when you do your SAM registration, you would go through the series of questions and say that you're self-certified as a veteran. However, if you want to do work with the VA, which if you are a veteran and you want to do federal contracting, you really do need to work with the VA. They almost exclusively work with veterans. There are some things, that veterans, there's some work out there that maybe there's no veterans available, and then they will go to other categories, but they do almost exclusively work with veterans. So if you're going to be in the federal contracting space and you're a veteran, you need to get registered or verified with the VA to do work with them. It's a kind of a similar process to the certification for 8A with SBA. It's kind of a certification, if you will, as well. And then you get Certified Veteran Enterprise, CVE certified, and then you can do work with the VA. So you can go to their small business site. There's lots of great information about the eligibility criteria and so on. or of course you can work with PTAC and they'll help you through that process also. I already mentioned SAM, so we won't cover that. Just again, remember that once you're certified, once you know what categories apply to you, you do want to, well, and again, even just to do business with the government, you need to get registered in the SAM site. And I guess I just showed, I included a screenshot for those of you that maybe aren't used to SAM. I just screenshotted a business where you can kind of see where the certifications show up. So if a contracting officer is looking up your profile, you can see here that you're woman-owned. This person is an economically disadvantaged woman-owned as well. She's HubZone certified and she's in the 8A program. So she's got them all, just about all of them covered. And so this is where it would show up once you fill out your profile and you have those certifications. So again, just to put this a little bit into context for how the government purchases from you, those categories are really all equal in terms of whatever that acquisition strategy is of the agent or that particular agency. So they can look at firms certified in any of those categories and say, are there any qualified businesses that can compete for our work? And then they can set it aside in one of those categories. If they can't get it in one of the smaller categories, then it may go all small business. And then if they can't find any small businesses they think that can reasonably do the work, that's when you may see things go unrestricted or full and open competition, as I mentioned, which also applies to anything over 250,000, which we'll talk about here. So $250,000 is, okay, so now I guess I should set this up. I went from talking about kind of the qualifications of the categories, and now I'm just gonna take a little transition and talk about how that applies to the set-asides. And some of this, again, you may have heard before, but it brings the two programs together. So once you're certified or once you've selected the categories that apply to you, you need to think about how the government purchases from those different categories. And they do that via set-asides, which I've sort of mentioned throughout. The basis of that will be based on dollar thresholds as well. The most important threshold is simplified acquisition. The simplified acquisition threshold, which right now is 250,000. Anything under 250,000 is required to be set aside for small businesses or one of those categories. Anything over 250,000 is really when the agency is out doing market research, looking again for those small businesses or businesses in those categories so that they can set it aside in one of those categories. They use what they call the rule of two. Oops, I'll go to that real quick. So the rule of two is, again, if they know their contract is going to be above simplified acquisition, they're going to go out and seek out small businesses to see, is there one of these categories that we could possibly set this aside? And the rule of two means that they can find at least 2 small businesses that they think could reasonably compete for that type of work, then they will set it aside in that category. So there's a whole sort of marketing strategy behind how you put yourself out there and make sure you make yourself available. And in the context of time, we won't cover that here. But as I mentioned, getting yourself registered in SAM, getting a good website, putting yourself in the dynamic small business search with a good, thorough profile, gives them a place to go out and look for you and try to find you just so that they can hopefully set that aside. And again, what they're trying to do is really to continue to narrow the competition. So again, whether it's not ideal going full and open, but going small business, and then again, narrowing the categories from there. I already mentioned this, so it's important how you take advantage of that. Again, it really does require a good marketing strategy for getting yourself out in front of the agencies. But also you need to pay attention to the market research that they're doing, which they may do via sources sought notices. They'll do solicitation meetings and so on. So it's important to look at those as well. Even look at agency websites and even follow them on Twitter. Some agencies are starting to use social media even to push out contracting opportunities that are coming up. So there's lots of different ways to look at it. I'm going to show you real quick. I wanted to show you real quick a sources sought notice because I think it's very important. And hopefully Daniel will tell me if you can't see this. I hope you can see this. So one of the ways that agencies do market research is through sources sought notices. Not every agency does them. We're slowly trying to convince them all to do it because it really is the best way for agencies to do market research is through sources sought. And what is a sources sought? The sources sought is literally they are seeking sources. So if they're not already looking for you, they're telling you to come to them. Now, this isn't an opportunity for bid. This isn't something that they're saying bid today. They're just saying we have this requirement. We're going to give you some general information about it. And then we want you to provide us some information about your business so that we can use that in our market research to help make a educated decision on what way we go in terms of our set aside. And so this is one that I just found the other day in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for some asphalt work. It's an IDIQ. And you can see when you go through, you can search the beta.sam site, which I think Daniel's going to do a class on beta.sam. So I'm not going to really cover beta.sam here, but I'm just, again, going to hone in on this opportunity. And you can see here that the contract type right now is sources sought. So they're looking for information. Here's when things are due. But more importantly, I just wanted to show you a quick description of the sources sought notice. So they'll tell you this is a sources sought, not sources sought notice only. This isn't a bid opportunity. This isn't an RFP. This is just seeking out sources. And they're looking for what socioeconomic category they could potentially set this aside. They'll tell you what NAICS code applies, what the size standard is for the NAICS code. And then they'll say, if you based on the scope of work, which this one it happens, they did some attachments. So they give you some draft information about the project. And then they say, if you think that this is something you might be able to do based on that minimal amount of information, then they want you to respond. So they'll say here, in response to this sources sought, please provide. And then here's what they need from you to submit. And again, they're just using this to collect information about what small businesses are out there. You will not get a response, likely, 99.9%. You will not get a response. It's just a thank you for submitting, and then you would want to follow this opportunity and then find out what set aside category they ultimately put it out for. And so sources sought are what I call your sweet spot. That's really where you want to put yourself out in front of the agency so that you can help guide those set aside decisions. Because once it's set aside, obviously, and if it's for, 8A only and you're not 8A certified, well, now you can't bid. So you really want to pay attention to the sources sought that are out there. Okay, so enough about that. Real quick then, I wanted to show you a pre-solicitation. And I just think it's important to understand the varying types so that you know what you're looking for. So once something's gone into pre-solicitation, they've already selected their category. So in this case, it'll tell you it's solicitation. Oh, this one's the actual solicitation. And they'll tell you it's now a total small business set aside. And here's the NAICS code. So if you are a small business based on this NAICS code, now you can bid. And they'll give you much more information in the solicitation. And then this one, they even tell you the size of the project. And then probably, yeah, there's some attachments with your specs and information. Now, it's important also to just, I'm not going to use this class to talk about the nuances of beta-SAM or solicitations, but again, just make sure you thoroughly read these. Again, work with PTAC because this one's important. For example, I believe, this one's in Yankton, South Dakota. So the work is in South Dakota, but the contracting agency, which is the Army Corps of Engineers, Omaha district, located here in Omaha. So it's important when you're doing your searches, make sure you understand the difference of where that work is located and where the contracting office is located, because a lot of the times, obviously, they're in 2 different locations. But the point of this was just to show you that this is what a total small business set aside would look like, basic information, and then somewhere down here, it would tell you, what information do you now need to submit in an actual proposal. So again, just think about what the different phases of these opportunities are, and for the set asides themselves. Sources notices, again, are the agencies doing market research. So I think they're really key for small businesses to respond to, so that we can get those things set aside. And from there, once they select a set aside, they may put out a pre-solicitation notice, which is just a guide. It's just to let you know that, here's a little bit more information to get industry ready for bid. They'll likely tell you when the solicitation is going to open. So that's sort of the pre-solicitation timeframe. Solicitation is, again, the actual bidding opportunity. It's important to follow those bidding opportunities on Beta SAM, because they're probably and likely always are, especially if it's a complex project. There may be amendments or things that are added. So you need to know about those amendments, and then obviously you move to award. In the essence of time, I'm just going to kind of cover this just real quickly. Again, I kind of sort of themed this throughout, which is to really think about what your federal marketing strategy is. It's going to be similar to any marketing strategy that you create for your business in the commercial space, except, there are a few nuances to the federal market that are a little bit different. Probably the most primary difference is in the commercial market, you sort of set the terms on how you sell your product to the public, and they have to meet those terms. In government, it's a little bit of the other way around. The government is going to set what those terms are. They're going to tell you when things are due. They're going to tell you when your milestones and deliverables have to be met. And more importantly, they're going to tell you when we're going to pay you. So depending on the contract, you need to understand what those payment terms are. You may not be paid until your first deliverable, which could be 60, 90 days out. So you need to think about cash flow and how you manage your business in terms of when you may get paid on that contract. And keep in mind, all of this is laid out in your contract. So you're never going to go into it blind. You're going to know prior to ever signing your notice to proceed, you're going to know what those terms are. But you need to make sure your business can build capacity and meet the requirement of the contract until you may get paid. And that may affect your marketing strategy. If you're in the software business and you can sit at a computer at a desk and work anywhere in the world, your overhead and your cash flow may be a little bit different than what you might need as a construction firm who's located in Omaha but wants to work in California. There's big differences, obviously, to that. So it's important to think about those things when you're thinking about your marketing strategy. Obviously, don't bid on something that you can't meet that scope of work until you're going to get paid, as an example. So think about how you build that. Past performance is critical. And really, it's critical to your business and your reputation, but it's really critical in the contracting space because you are rated on those and scored on how you do on those contracts. And that will affect you when you bid on future work. So your past performance that you're building is particularly important because in some cases, when you bid on a future project, you have to actually submit references and submit, similar projects in size and scope in order to maybe win that future work. So you need to think about all of those things. When you market yourself, initially, you'll want to create a good capability statement, which is sort of language we use in contracting, but it's really your marketing brochure, if you will. Maybe a 1 or 2 pager of what you do, and you'll want to get that out to the agencies. PTAC has really perfected, I think, creating capability statements, so you can certainly work with PTAC as well, and they'll help you put one of those together. But also make sure you're attending. If most of these days they're all virtual, but a lot of agencies do industry days. They do lunches and meet and greets. So again, if you want to work with agencies, you need to get yourself out there. So thinking about if the time is right for you, I think it's important, you certainly, depending on what you sell, you could be a startup business getting your foot wet, your feet wet in contracting. You may want to start as a subcontractor first. Make sure you qualify for the various socioeconomic categories that we talked about. Obviously, the more you qualify for, the better your leverage. But potentially starting out as a subcontractor to build that past performance may be a good first step into contracting. Really, you probably need to have been in business for a little while and had some similar contracts in size and scope in order to bid on work, which again, you can build through subbing. Past performance, I already talked about, which is critically important in contracting. Having a good market strategy, doing some good market research, is really important, and it is a big task, but it can be done in government. Again, all the information is out there about past awards, so you can find out what agencies what types of contracts are they awarding, who's winning those contracts, what they paid for the contract. Now, you're not going to get proprietary information about a bid that another competing business put in, but you can get the total dollar amount of what the government paid for that contract. So you can start to, again, build your pricing strategy potentially even around that. It gives you a good first start. And I already talked about cash flow and financial strength, critically important in government. Don't bid on something where they require 10,000 widgets if you know your plant can only build 10 at a time or whatever. So make sure you're bidding on things that not only you can meet the scope of work, but also, again, can you cash flow, prior to potentially being awarded, and can you even raise capital? Maybe you need a working line of credit to get yourself up and going, those kinds of things. Just a quick snapshot. I know we're here at the end. In terms of doing your market research, I was going to say these are your three important, but really your fourth bullet here is the PTAC. Work with the PTAC to do some good, thorough market research. But if you want to kind of get started on your own, and I have FBO on here, I apologize. See, so many places you have to update things. FBO.gov is now the Beta SAM site, so hopefully you're aware of that. Beta.sam.gov is where the contracting opportunities have been moved to. But also look at usaspending.gov. It's a pretty good user-friendly site for looking at past awards, so you can see kind of what agencies are buying and, again, who your competition is, what are they winning. The current open contracts for bid are on the beta.sam site. And then if you want to look at agency forecast and look at what are the agencies hoping to buy in the next fiscal year to kind of get yourself prepared, maybe get yourself ready to put a team together, which teaming strategies is a whole nother market strategy for federal. I think we're going to do a class on teaming and joint venturing in the future as well, so look out for that. But you can get those agency forecasts and, again, start to put together your strategy on how you're going to bid on those in the future. Those forecasts, the links to all those agencies is on the acquisition.gov site. If you go to the agency forecast, you'll see a bunch of different agencies, and that'll link you to what each of their upcoming forecasts are for the next fiscal year. And with that, that is my contact information. So if you have any more questions about this, certainly email me. I know we kind of go through a lot of information quickly in an hour, but as I said, we have lots of classes with PTAC coming up where we're going to delve into each of these a little bit more, so stay on the lookout for those. I think I have Daniel's contact information here as well. So you had that earlier, but now you have it again. If you want to work with PTAC, he's your first touch into the organization, and he'll help you understand what you're trying to do and get you connected with one of the counselors that they have. I still did include my PTAC slide, but anything and all things government contracting they can help you with. And again, you can talk to Daniel to get more information about that. And with that, if there's any more questions, Daniel, I'd be happy to spend a couple minutes if people have stayed on and we can answer some of those.